Besides the video, they say they also have DNA proof of Bigfoot's existence.
Imagine standing alone in a dense forest, miles away from civilization. The night is thick with darkness, broken only by the occasional flicker of a distant flashlight. Suddenly, you hear something, a low growl, the crack of a branch underfoot, and a presence that you can feel more than hear. You've been tracking something for days now, and you're getting closer. But this isn't just any creature. This is Bigfoot, or so you thought. Why they started? For years, the search for Bigfoot had been a matter of folklore and speculation, driven by the few lucky or unlucky individuals who claimed to have seen the creature. To the outside world, Bigfoot was a legend, something that stirred the imagination but never quite stood up to the test of science. But for a select group of researchers, the quest for proof was personal. They had spent countless nights in the wilderness, collecting evidence, studying reports, and hearing whispers from those who claimed to have had encounters. When a series of strange occurrences were reported from the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, the researchers were intrigued. This was it, the break they had been waiting for. For years, they had been chasing shadows, but now they had something concrete, footprints. But these weren't just any tracks. These were unusually large, and the depth of the prints suggested a creature of incredible weight. This wasn't a hoax. Something massive had walked through the woods, and it had left behind a trail. The discovery of the footprints was just the beginning, but it was enough to send shivers down their spines. The size of the prints was unlike anything they had ever seen, each footprint measuring nearly 18 inches long, with a depth that suggested something extraordinarily heavy had walked through the forest. The terrain wasn't easy to navigate, yet the creature had left behind perfectly formed prints, as if it had been walking with purpose. At first, the team was filled with excitement. They had the evidence they had been searching for, proof that Bigfoot wasn't just a myth. But as they continued to follow the trail deeper into the forest, something started to feel off. The prints were leading them in a direction that didn't make sense. The further they went, the denser the trees became, and the more isolated they felt. The team began to question their own judgment. They knew that the forest could be dangerous, but this was something else. There was a sense of being watched, a feeling that intensified with every step they took. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, and the weight of the forest pressed in on them. Despite this unease, they pressed on, eager to uncover the truth. But what awaited them wasn't the creature they had been expecting. What was waiting for them at the end of this trail, and would they be prepared for the horrors they were about to encounter? The unseen terror, sounds that weren't meant for human ears. Night fell quickly in the forest, and with it came an eerie silence. The researchers had set up camp in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines. The air was cold, and the only sound was the occasional crackle of the fire. But as they settled in for the night, something else began to stir. At first, it was just a whisper, something distant and barely perceptible. The researchers dismissed it as the wind or the usual sounds of nocturnal wildlife. But then the growls began. Low, guttural noises that seemed to come from all directions at once. These weren't the sounds of wolves or bears. This was something far deeper, more resonant, something that carried a primal quality to it. The team froze, their minds racing to make sense of what they were hearing. Had they finally encountered Bigfoot, or was there something else out there? Something darker, more dangerous? As the growls continued, the researchers huddled together, trying to make sense of the sound. It was clear now that the creature wasn't just a physical presence. It was something that had the ability to instill terror on a psychological level. They could feel it in their bones, a heaviness that seemed to pull at them, urging them to leave. But they couldn't. They had come this far, and they had to press on. Could they survive the night? Or had they ventured too far into a world they were never meant to understand? A glimpse of the beast. The next morning, the team reviewed the footage they had captured during the night. They had set up cameras, hoping to catch even the faintest glimpse of the creature. What they found was nothing short of astonishing. In the footage, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, impossibly tall, towering above the trees around it. Its movements were fluid, almost graceful, as it passed by the cameras. But it wasn't the size that left the team stunned, it was the eyes. The creature's eyes seemed to glow, reflecting the light from their cameras in a way that was not natural. It was as if the creature knew they were watching, as if it were toying with them. The footage was grainy, but it was enough to send a chill down their spines. The creature had been aware of their presence. It wasn't just a wild animal, it was something far more intelligent, more capable than they had ever imagined. As the team watched the footage, they felt the weight of what they had uncovered. This wasn't just a cryptid hunt. It was a brush with something far older and more powerful than anything they had ever prepared for. What did the team truly discover? And how would they confront the creature that seemed to be one step ahead of them at every turn? A nightmare unfolds. The footage only deepened the mystery, but the real terror came when they began to track the creature further. They followed its trail, hoping to find more clues, but what they encountered was not a creature willing to be studied. It was a predator, and they were the prey. For hours, the team moved deeper into the forest, their senses heightened by the fear that seemed to follow them at every step. Suddenly, the sounds returned, the growls, the rustling in the bushes, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. The creature was out there, and it was closing in on them. The team was now in full flight. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves seemed to signal the creature's approach. They ran blindly through the forest, their hearts pounding in their chests. But the more they ran, the closer they seemed to get to something far worse. They had no idea what they were running from, but they knew one thing: they had made a fatal mistake. Eventually, they found a moment of respite. They had managed to escape the creature for the time being, but they knew they weren't safe. The realization that they had gone too far began to settle in. The trail they had been following was not just a path to Bigfoot. It was a path to something far older, something far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. What they had encountered was not simply a creature, it was a warning. The symbols they found carved into the trees, the strange markings that seemed to form a pattern, pointed to a reality far darker than they could have imagined. This wasn't just about a cryptid, it was about something ancient, something that humans were never meant to understand. As they left the forest behind, they realized that the pursuit of Bigfoot had led them into the heart of something far more terrifying, a force that had been lurking in the woods for centuries, watching, waiting for the right moment to make its presence known. What did the symbols mean? And what did they uncover that could change everything we know about the creature they had been hunting? The forest is alive. After their terrifying experience, the team sat in stunned silence. What they had once thought to be a harmless, albeit elusive, cryptid hunt had turned into a nightmare. The trail of Bigfoot had led them into something far darker than they ever could have imagined. The forest had come alive around them, and they were no longer just passive observers of nature. They were part of a deeper, more dangerous story. The markings they had discovered on the trees were not random. They appeared to be symbols, carved into the bark with precision and care. They weren't just signs of territorial markings or animal behavior. These were something far older, something more ritualistic. Ancient symbols, potentially linked to cultures and practices lost to time, seemed to surround them. The trees themselves seemed to be watching, bearing witness to the mistakes made by the team. The markings suggested that the area wasn't merely home to a cryptid. It was a sacred ground, a place where something had lived for centuries, something that had outlasted human civilizations. The researchers began to wonder, had they been drawn here, unknowingly, by forces beyond their comprehension? They realized that what they had uncovered was not just about Bigfoot, it was about the forest itself, a place untouched by human history, protected by forces that were never meant to be disturbed. But as the days passed and the terror began to sink in, they couldn't shake the feeling that the creature they were hunting wasn't just a part of this ancient landscape. It was connected to something much more significant. The deeper they ventured into the woods, the more they realized that the forest had its own secrets, secrets that only those who dared venture deep enough might ever uncover. Were they on the verge of a discovery that could change the course of history? Or were they walking toward an even greater danger that none of them could escape? A moment of truth. The team's confidence had crumbled. The creature they had been tracking wasn't just elusive, it was strategic. It had studied them, played with their minds, and now it was leading them towards something they couldn't possibly understand. Every step they took deeper into the forest felt like they were inching closer to their demise. But at the same time, they couldn't turn back. There was no escape from the obsession that had taken hold of them. On the 6th day, the team decided to set a final trap, believing that the creature would eventually make itself known. They staked out a large area near the symbols they had discovered, placing cameras and motion detectors in the hope of catching a glimpse of it. They knew this might be their last chance. Hours passed with no sign of movement. The forest was silent again, but this time there was a palpable sense of dread. The moment the sun began to set, everything changed. The motion detectors went off, and the cameras started recording. The team's breath caught in their throats. There, on the screen, was the creature. But this time, it wasn't just a fleeting glimpse. It was standing in full view, a hulking figure towering over the trees. Its presence was overwhelming, like a shadow that loomed larger with every passing second. It wasn't just a creature of legend. It was something out of a nightmare, its eyes glowing with a predatory gleam. It turned slowly, deliberately, toward the cameras, its movements calculated as if it knew exactly what they were doing. And then, it did something that would haunt the researchers for the rest of their lives. It let out a deep, rumbling growl and began to move toward them. At that moment, they knew this wasn't just about capturing evidence anymore. This wasn't a hunt they could win. The creature had been toying with them from the very beginning, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. Could they escape this final encounter? Or had they finally pushed the creature too far, sealing their fate in the process? A fight for survival. Panic set in as the creature closed the distance between them. It was moving faster than they had ever imagined possible, its massive body cutting through the forest with terrifying speed. The team scattered, running in every direction, but no matter where they went, the creature was always one step behind them. The night air was thick with the sound of heavy footsteps, and the growl of the creature reverberated through the trees, a reminder that they were being hunted. The forest, once a place of mystery and intrigue, had turned into a deadly maze, each turn leading them further into danger. One by one, the researchers lost sight of each other, their cries lost in the chaos. The team was disbanded, each member now focused only on survival. But as they ran, they couldn't shake the feeling that the creature wasn't just chasing them. It was watching, calculating, waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite their efforts, it was clear that the creature had the upper hand. It was more than just a cryptid. It was a force of nature, a presence that could not be explained by science or logic. They had been foolish to think they could capture it, to think they could tame the wilderness. In the end, they were nothing more than prey in a world that had always been ruled by something far older and more powerful. As dawn broke and the researchers found their way back to the edge of the forest, battered and exhausted, they realized they had narrowly escaped with their lives. But they knew this experience would haunt them forever. They had come looking for answers, but instead, they had uncovered a mystery far more dangerous than they could have imagined. What would happen next? Would the team ever find peace? Or had their journey into the unknown left them marked forever? A haunted legacy. In the weeks that followed, the research team slowly began to return to normal life. But for each of them, the memories of what had transpired in the forest lingered like a shadow, always present, always watching. The footage they had captured, the footage of the creature standing before them, its eyes glowing with that unearthly light, became a reminder of the cost of their obsession. The symbols on the trees, the growls in the night, and the creature that had outsmarted them at every turn. These things would haunt them forever. Despite the terrifying experiences, the team never truly abandoned their search for answers. But they knew, deep down, that some mysteries were never meant to be solved. The forest, the creature, the symbols, they were all part of a world beyond human understanding, a world that had no place in the realm of the living. Their biggest mistake was ever thinking they could unravel the secrets of that ancient place. For the rest of their lives, they would live with the knowledge that they had come too close to something they were never meant to understand, and that the forest had shown them a truth that was far darker than they could ever explain. Months passed, but the team couldn't shake the haunting memories of their encounter in the forest.
The footage from the cameras, the images of the creature standing still, its eyes glowing ominously, continued to linger in their minds. They had tried to move on, to return to their normal lives, but the shadows of that night followed them. The forest had changed something in each of them, and now it felt as though they had become part of a much darker story. The physical wounds had healed, but the psychological scars were much deeper. The team members who had once been close-knit friends and researchers now found it hard to even speak about what they had witnessed. They were haunted by more than the creature itself. They were haunted by the realization that they had disturbed something ancient, something that shouldn't have been disturbed. The forest had shown them a side of reality that no one was meant to see, and the truth had marked them all. Even now, as they tried to return to their lives, strange things began to happen. One team member, who had been especially vocal about their encounter, began receiving disturbing phone calls in the dead of night. The calls were silent, but the air crackled with an unnatural energy. Other members started to experience vivid nightmares, dreams of running through a dense forest, with the creature always just behind them. It was as though the forest had never truly let go of them. Others, who had tried to ignore the encounter, found that it wasn't so easy to forget. One researcher returned to the forest alone, convinced that he could face his fear and gain closure. He never returned. A search was launched, but despite combing the forest for days, no trace of him was ever found. The team couldn't help but wonder, had the creature claimed him, or had he simply become part of the forest, lost forever, just as the legends said would happen to those who wandered too deep? Could the forest be pulling them back, claiming their minds as well as their bodies? Was it the creature's power that kept them from escaping, or something darker, something older? Revisiting the edge. Despite the fear that gripped them, the research team eventually made a decision. They would return to the forest. Not all of them, but a small group of survivors, each carrying their own demons from the first encounter. They knew the risks, but they couldn't shake the compulsion to understand what had happened, to uncover the truth behind the creature and the forest that had swallowed them whole. The decision wasn't made lightly. They had already lost one of their own, and many others had abandoned the search, unwilling to face the horrors they had witnessed. But the few who remained were determined. They felt they had to find answers, not just for themselves, but for the families of those who had been lost, and for the world, which deserved to know what was truly out there. With heavy hearts and minds full of questions, they prepared for their return to the forest. This time, however, they were better prepared. They had more equipment, more knowledge, and a deeper understanding of what they might be facing. The symbols they had discovered in their previous journey seemed to call to them, beckoning them to uncover their meaning. But as they ventured back into the wilderness, they could feel it, the weight of the forest pressing in on them, just as it had before. It wasn't the same place it had been when they had first arrived. It felt different now, as though the forest itself knew they were coming back. Would they make it this time? Could they face the creature and the secrets of the forest? Or would they too vanish into the unknown? The silent observer. As the team made their way back into the heart of the forest, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. At first, it was just a sense of unease, a fleeting moment of paranoia that seemed to fade as they moved forward. But soon, the feeling grew stronger. It wasn't just the rustling of the trees or the cracking of branches underfoot. It was something else, an unexplainable presence that seemed to hover just out of sight. The creature was there. They knew it. The evidence was all around them, the broken branches, the unsettling silence, the footprints that appeared and disappeared as if mocking their every move. But this time, the creature wasn't rushing toward them. It wasn't charging or attacking. It was watching. It was letting them wander, letting them explore, as if it knew exactly where they were going and what they were doing. With every step, the tension built. The researchers found themselves moving cautiously, more aware of their surroundings than ever before. They had learned the hard way that every movement in the forest mattered. Every crackling twig, every snap of a branch could signal the creature's approach. And this time, they weren't just looking for Bigfoot. They were looking for answers. They wanted to understand what the creature was, where it came from, and why it had led them to this point. Was the creature toying with them, or was there something more to its behavior? What did it want from them, and was this their final chance to uncover the truth? Unlocking the symbols. After days of trekking through the forest, the team finally arrived at the location where they had discovered the strange symbols. The area was eerily quiet, the air thick with a heavy sense of anticipation. The markings were still visible on the trees, though they had become more worn, more weathered by the passage of time. But they were unmistakable. These symbols were deliberate, crafted with care and precision, etched into the bark with an almost supernatural force. As they studied the symbols, something strange began to happen. The air seemed to vibrate with energy, the ground beneath them pulsing as though it had a heartbeat of its own. The team couldn't explain it, but the atmosphere was charged with an electric tension that made their skin crawl. It was as though the forest itself was alive, reacting to their presence, waiting for them to unlock its mysteries. The symbols were not just random carvings. They were part of a larger pattern, a message that had been left behind by an ancient civilization, one that had known about the creature long before the team had even heard of Bigfoot. This wasn't just a cryptid. It was part of a long-lost history, a history that stretched back thousands of years. The revelation hit them hard. They weren't just hunting a creature. They were uncovering an ancient secret, a truth that had been hidden for centuries. The creature wasn't just a myth. It was a guardian, a protector of the forest, a force that had kept the wilderness safe from human interference for millennia. The symbols were a warning, a message from the past, urging those who found them to turn back before it was too late. Was this discovery enough to stop the team from continuing their search? Or had they uncovered a truth too powerful, too dangerous to ignore? Face to face with the creature. The team was at a crossroads. They had discovered the truth, but the question remained, what would they do with it? Could they leave the forest behind and walk away, knowing that they had unearthed a secret so profound it could change the course of history? Or would they push forward, risk everything, and confront the creature once and for all? As they debated their next move, a figure appeared in the distance. At first, it was just a shadow moving between the trees, but then it emerged fully, tall, hulking, and unmistakable. The creature was here. It wasn't charging at them, as they had feared. Instead, it stood there, watching, waiting, as if it had been expecting them all along. This was the moment. The team had come so far, and now they had to face the creature. They had no choice but to confront it, to demand answers. As they slowly approached, the creature did not move. Its eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, followed their every movement. It was aware of them, just as it had always been. And in that moment, they understood. It wasn't just a creature. It was something older, something more powerful. And perhaps, just perhaps, it had been watching them all along, guiding them toward this moment of truth. What would happen now? Would the team survive the encounter? Or had they crossed a line that could never be undone? The creature's origins. The more the team delved into the mystery of the forest, the more they began to understand that the creature they had been tracking wasn't just part of a recent legend. Its presence had been embedded in the area for far longer than they had originally thought. The symbols carved into the trees were not just remnants of some obscure culture. They were markers of a much older, ancient belief system, one that had safeguarded the forest for thousands of years. The team had spent their nights poring over every shred of evidence they had collected. They studied the footage from the cameras and analyzed the footage of the creature's movements. Despite the poor quality, the figure they had encountered was far more than a mere cryptid. It was a being that had existed for an incomprehensible length of time, and its connection to the symbols was undeniable. Through their research, the team found that similar markings could be found in other parts of the world, from remote villages in Asia to forgotten caves in Europe. The parallels were too consistent to be coincidence. This was a global phenomenon, a creature, or rather, a species of ancient guardians that had been preserved and protected through the ages. The team hypothesized that the creature wasn't simply a relic of ancient myths. It was a protector of something far greater. It was guarding a secret buried deep within the forest, a secret that could change the course of human history. Was the creature truly a guardian, or was it a manifestation of something far darker, something that had been concealed for millennia? Could the team uncover the truth behind its origins, or would they be silenced before they could reveal it to the world? Living with the unknown. As the days passed, the team's connection to the forest grew more intense. They could feel the creature's presence more keenly, and the boundary between human civilization and the wilderness seemed to blur. Each step they took into the depths of the forest felt like a descent into another world, one where the rules of nature didn't apply, and the creature was the true ruler. The researchers began to notice subtle changes in their behavior. Some of them felt a compulsion to stay in the forest longer than they had planned. They became drawn to the ancient symbols, as if they were calling them. The lines between what was real and what was imagined began to fade. The sensation of being watched didn't diminish, it only grew stronger. They would often find themselves looking over their shoulders, convinced that the creature was lurking just beyond the trees, waiting for them to make a mistake. But it wasn't only the creature that they had to contend with. The forest itself seemed to be alive, pushing back against their intrusion, rejecting them the deeper they went. The team's mental and physical health began to deteriorate. Sleep became a distant memory as they were tormented by vivid nightmares and hallucinations. Some members began speaking in cryptic language, as though they had become possessed by the forest's strange energy. They had entered the domain of something ancient, something beyond their understanding, and it had begun to take its toll on them. The deeper the team ventured, the more desperate they became to understand the creature's purpose. They had followed it for days, trekking through treacherous terrain, barely surviving each encounter. But the answers they sought were always just out of reach. Every time they thought they had uncovered something crucial, they were met with more questions, more enigmas that seemed to lead them in circles. What do you think? Did the researchers uncover something that should have stayed hidden? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch our other videos.